Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health is a not-for-profit group of hospitals and medical clinics caring for surrounding communities. Their nurses, physicians, and staff are nationally recognized for their remarkable devotion to patient care. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, from the business and industry point of view, we're now entering into annual meeting season. It is the yearly rite of passage for all public companies to share past year performance or portend where they might be headed. And if early signs are accurate, in general, year-over-year results will be better than 2011 during this same time. Welcome again, and thanks for supporting the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I am Chris William. And good business news is good news for the humanities as well, more specifically arts, culture, and politics. We start this week's dialogue in just a moment.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte, enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising health care costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded February 3rd, 2012. On this week's program, Philip Kirk of Brady Energy Services, Ken May of the South Carolina Arts Commission, and special guest Dr. Larry Wheeler, Director of the North Carolina Museum of Art. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome again to our program, Happy Weekend. And you know, you could almost say, guys, you could almost say Happy Spring. It certainly feels like it. Feels better. Phil, welcome. Ken, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Phil, we'll start with you. You are not a stranger to politics in the Old North State. Ran and headed up the North Carolina Chamber for many years. So I've got to ask you, when you look at Democrats that are not running for governor, now that Bev Perdue's decided she's not to, that says more than those who are running for governor that are Democrats. Erskine Bowles said no. Heath Shuler, congressman, said no. Alan Joynes from Winston-Salem said no. Anthony Fox from Charlotte decided not to. And the list kind of goes on and on. Bob Etheridge said yes. But what does it say when so many Democrats are saying no? Is there writing on the wall here?
I think there are several things in play, and one is the short time to organize a statewide campaign. We're about 90 days ahead of the primary when that will actually occur in May. So I think two things were in play. One was the short time frame to organize a statewide campaign and hire consultants and do your planning and all that, whereas Walter Dalton, the current lieutenant governor, could jump right over into the governor's race for the Democrats because he already had a statewide organization, although at a somewhat lower level. And I think the second factor is the Pat McCrory being a double-digit leader in every poll that I'm aware of, and he has high name ID, $2 million in the bank, and I think it's going to be a good year for Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing for Republicans to be concerned about, and that's the Obama factor. How many campaign workers they're going to hire, how many headquarters, the attention from the Democratic National Convention. Personally, I don't think Obama will do as well this time as he did last time, but who knows?
Well, let me interrupt you just because you said the Obama factor. Well, no, but in North Carolina when Obama won and ran, that was a different kind of factor than it is now. Now he just has basically a pile of money. Does he have the credibility? Is that what you're talking about?
Are you talking about Obama?
Yeah, I'm talking about Barack Obama.
Well, he also has a record. Before he's an excellent speaker and an excellent campaigner, and before he had no record to be attacked on, so to speak, and this time he has a record. The main challenge is that with the improving economy, his poll numbers will probably start going back up. And plus you have Romney will probably be the nominee of the Republican Party, but he's not on fire in South Carolina, for example, and in some of the other southern states.
Right. Yeah, and just one more quick question on this. Promise this is not MSNBC, and I'm not Chris Matthews, Ken. So if you just bear with us one more second here. Pat McCrory was trending well against Bev Perdue. There's a different challenger. Well, most likely there will be a different challenger from the Democrats. Does the strengths that the former Charlotte Mayor Pat McCrory still have? Will he have those strengths against whoever they put up?
There's unity and enthusiasm behind McCrory within the Republican Party. He won't have a major challenger. There's some trending toward him in the independent votes. Not running against Perdue has one disadvantage, and that is you don't have her record to attack. However, all the other candidates are not well known statewide, so it's who knows which way that's going to fall.
Ken, since we're talking about politics, a year ago, Nikki Haley's first State of the State address, she singled out ETV in South Carolina, and the South Carolina Arts Commission is being completely cut from her idea of what a state budget should look like. You're still here, arguably better for it. What do you say to that? How do you, when you hear, and not necessarily an indictment against Governor Haley, while it might be, I mean, what happens to art in a clearly polarizing political time? Is it one of those things that just ends up on the cutting block?
Well, it didn't. We're still here, and part of that is because it is not now, and I don't think it ever has been, and I hope it will not be, a partisan issue. I mean, yes, there are occasions when it sort of flares up and certain images or scandals are used for political fundraising, basically. But in general, it's a very bipartisan level of support that our agency and arts agencies all over the country have been able to muster because they're meeting a real need in communities all over their states. We provide funding in almost every county of South Carolina every year. We support community activities that people want. And we provide, as a state, as a public agency, investing public dollars, we bring an accountability and also a mandate to serve everybody that I think resonates with a lot of political leaders. And they hear back from their communities that this is something that's important for them. So there's an attempt to make it a political football, but I think in actual practical politics, it has broad grassroots support, and that's something that works.
How do you, I guess the question is how do you articulate economic impact when you're talking about a very ambiguous or a very broad-based thing is art? How do you do that?
I mean, you could argue that that's not the most important aspect of it because nobody goes to her wife or husband and says, honey, let's go out and have an economic impact in our community tonight. Now, they say, let's go to a show, let's have a good time. However, there is that effect, and it's huge, actually. You have right here in the state Stuart Rosenfeld, who has pioneered, actually, a way of quantifying the impact of the creative industries. So he is talking about not only just the narrower sector, which is the nonprofit art sector, but looking at the broad scope of creative industries that really is, one way or another, creating products and services that people buy and participate in and have, therefore, an economic impact. In South Carolina, we just sort of mimicked Stu's methodology. Doug Woodward from USC did a study for us and documented about $9.2 billion in annual impact that arts and culture
it's
and creative
9
industries.
With a B?
Billion? 9
billion?
with a B.
In South Carolina?
In South Carolina, about 78,000 jobs. And this is important also in our arguments, about $570 million in tax return to the state from that activity. So we're talking the whole spectrum, for-profit as well as nonprofit, as well as self-employed individuals. But it's about 3% of the South Carolina economy now. And that is pretty true also across the board, not just in South Carolina.
Do you think when you make that argument to the State House, do they hear those numbers?
They hear those numbers. They definitely hear those numbers.
Is it, this almost sounds like, Phil, and you've been involved in economic development for a long time, this almost sounds like the tourism example, where there's such a big industry, and they're usually kind of treated as a redheaded stepchild in both the Carolinas. certainly large, hugely impactful, but don't get what they feel like they need to get from the public.
And I think that's changed over the last several years, and I would apply the same principle to the cultural amenities, to the arts and the symphony and so on. I think more and more decision makers are linking economic development, taxes, quality of life. Business and industry locates in North and South Carolina for a lot of different reasons, but one's the quality of life, and what could better impact the quality of life than the cultural amenities? So the story's finally getting told.
And there's also a direct linkage between tourism and arts in many cases. The Spoleto Festival in Charleston is a very good example of that. It's a huge tourism draw, and it's one of the world-class arts events in the United States.
And just a quick follow-up for this, and we're going to bring our guest on in just a second. Ken, what percentage would you say the arts impact in economic development activity? You know, when they're out looking for the next Boeing or adding to the BMW plant that seems to have been a huge blessing for all of us.
Right.
I mean, what percentage do you think art plays in that dialogue, that decision?
In say, relocating a manufacturing facility or so?
5%, 10%?
Probably 5%, but I think it might be a critical timing issue. Because I think, you know, anybody looking at relocating a facility is looking at all the basics about water and sewer and workforce and all of that, and what incentives they're going to get from the state. All of that is upfront. All of that is part of the long game discussion. But then I think maybe when you come down to it, when everybody's kind of weighing in equal, then quality of life comes in.
Yeah.
And they say, but where can I get my executives to live?
Yeah.
And so I think it's part of the closing package that's critical.
Okay, that'll be the last word for now. Next week on our program, we'll have a panel of regional chamber executives talking about economic development here in both North and South Carolina, and then kind of staying with the whole vein of the chambers. The new chamber, relatively new chamber, chair of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, a gentleman named Jim Reynolds, who in his own right is a bit of an educational expert. We will be talking to Chairman Reynolds about the South Carolina Chamber and certainly education in the Palmetto State. The North Carolina Museum of Art tends to be on many rating agencies' short list of top grand galleries in this country. The challenge, though, during a season of tough budgets and austerity is how you maintain funding and position in community when competition for dollars is so acute. We talked about it in the beginning of the program. Joining us now is the North Carolina Museum of Art Director, Dr. Larry Wheeler. Dr. Wheeler, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah. Now, Larry, you have been smiling since you walked in the studio. Is that because you got 2011 behind you? You had a good Rembrandt exhibit? You got your building finally built? What is it?
In other words, I don't live in the real world. I live in the art museum world, and it's been great there, I'll tell you, for the last 3 years. I don't know why. I guess somebody's looking after us, but we have had extraordinary success, not only with opening the brand new building designed by Thomas Pfeiffer in New York, which has won so many international architectural awards. AIA, the American Institute of Architects, declared it one of the 10 greatest buildings built in 2010 by an American architect anywhere in the world. And it's a gorgeous building, and I think one of the great pieces of contemporary architecture in North Carolina and in the United States. We're lucky to have it here. So the public has responded to it. It's a beautiful experience with great collection of art, and it's a destination now.
You know, it's a good point. I know you say it with pride, and you should. I mean, what a great team, and you know, what a time. I mean, your timing on getting the funding and the building was just impeccable. What is it about building a building like that that brings that it's much more than pride? I get the sense in the art community, isn't it?
The only reason we could build a building like that in North Carolina when we built it is that I truly believe that a belief in the value of the arts is part of the core value system of the people of North Carolina. And if you look at our history, going back into the 1940s, when the state of North Carolina invested the people's tax money to start a North Carolina Symphony Orchestra, in the 1940s, they invested $1 million of the people's tax money to begin a collection of art for the people of North Carolina, which then became the North Carolina Museum of Art. It was a state that in the 1960s established the first University for the Arts, the North Carolina School of the Arts, and you can go on and on and on, and through our history. So it's not just recent, it's when we were a more conservative and a more agrarian state than we are today, and a much poorer state than we are today. But the will of the people has always been there to do important things in the arts and in education. And I think there's something sort of ephemeral, but it's just something you can't put your finger on, but you know it's the spirit of the state.
Isn't that interesting to hear somebody who is at the center and the core of it even has trouble sometimes articulating what's at the center of that magic? Phil, question?
You know, we focus on the economy a lot, and I'd like to direct a question toward the budget situation in North Carolina and South Carolina. The budget's been a challenge for several years. How has the funding model changed for the Museum of Art in terms of public dollars versus private dollars over the last several years, and what would you predict for the future?
Well, the public dollars have been steady. We have not lost public dollars since I've been the director of the museum, which is now going on 18 years. But what has happened is that we've been able to increase private investment in public institutions. And when I came to the museum in 1994, we were 70% funded by the state. Today, we are 70% privately funded and only 30% funded by the state. So we've completely shifted that because, you know, back to the core values, I think that people believe in investing in things they think are important in people's lives. And we've not had any problem with individuals or with foundations or with corporations becoming partners with us and promoting these great programs that the people want in their lives.
Okay.
So you've got a new building, which always gives you a significant bump. People want to come and see it. And then you had a blockbuster show right on the back of that. So has that translated into major difference in your fundraising, memberships, obviously ticket sales, contributions? What have you seen as a result of that?
Well, it's translated into increased earned income. And when you look at our budget structure, earned income is a big part of that. 1/3 of our income is earned, 1/3 is raised, and 1/3 comes from public sources. And that earned income comes from ticket revenues through special exhibitions. We are free to the public for the collections and for the main experience of the museum, but we do charge admission for the special exhibitions. And that's considerable revenue. And you build business around that. You build retail and food service and all the things that you would expect.
So there are no memberships at your museum?
There are memberships, and we increase memberships. With Rembrandt recently, we brought in 3,700 new members in 3 months.
That's the bump. Yeah, boy.
That was great.
You know, when you pull the curtain back, Larry, on the demographics of those who not just visit, but those who are engaged, and as you said, you have partnerships. How has that changed since 2008 and since the very tough economic times? Have the have the demographics changed dramatically?
Well, we've had some growth in the state, even though the economy's been flat. Growth in population, and particularly in the Triangle where we are located, it's been fairly healthy. And I've not noticed, we've not had any decline in support. Fundraising has remained steady. It's not diminished at all. Actually, our state budget has remained pretty healthy through the whole thing. So from 1908 until the present in 2008 to 2012, it's been consistently good with slight increases.
Good problem to have.
I'd like to follow up on that one. We're losing a lot of our well-known philanthropists to death. Sad to say in a lot of cases, but we'll all get there someday. Is the baton being passed to the younger generation, and what challenges does that present for the museum, for example?
Well, that is a responsibility to develop the new generation of leaders in the arts. We work on that all the time. I'm always looking for new entrepreneurial types of board members, those who I've identified as on the arc to acquiring wealth and involving them in the leadership in the right ways. And there are a lot of those people who are keenly interested in seeing the arts succeed. They're interested in the visual arts. They become collectors of art. It's a really dynamic environment, so I'm not too worried about it.
Okay.
Well, speaking of the younger generation, one of the trends that I've been seeing generally in fundraising around the country is steady growth, getting back to where we were before the recession, but particularly growth in online giving. What are y'all doing about that?
We're doing as much as we can about that. No, I quite agree.
And what are you seeing there?
Well, you know, as I tell my staff, we are now in the 21st century, and the 21st century is the digital age. And so if we don't take advantage of all the opportunities that digital communications present to us, then we're fools. And so online, you can give money to the art museum, you can buy memberships to the art museum, you can buy tickets to the art museum, and we really promote it through social media to meet us through that medium.
So what's the experience? You know, you talked about the e-commerce part of that, but I guess Larry, what is the experience with, you know, the Rembrandt? How do you get the Rembrandt out there? Or can it only be experienced when you're standing in the middle of a gallery?
It can only be truly experienced when you're standing next to a Rembrandt. But we'd like to encourage people to take advantage of that opportunity through the same means. For example, it's really an amazing story to me, as I hope to the public. During 3 months of Rembrandt, we attracted 151,000 people to the museum in Raleigh. They came from all 50 states, they came from 44 foreign countries, and they came from all 100 counties in North Carolina. Now, how did that happen? Not through TV, not through newspaper and magazine advertising necessarily, although that helped. But it was through the internet, and it was through our website. And people, if they keyed into Rembrandt or keyed into traveling to the area and they picked up on Rembrandt, they could buy a ticket right there and plan their visit to Raleigh. And I am convinced that it is through that whole system of digital communications, internet communications, that is made possible today.
So how does that intersect with Generation Z or the next generation? I mean, how do you get that demographic, I guess, not just involved, but how do you get them excited about being part of whatever museum of art is going to look like 10 or 20 years from now?
You serve a lot of wine and beer. You have them for special parties and occasions. You create organizations that gives them ownership in the museum. We have a lot of organizations just for younger leaders and younger people. We call our group the Contemporaries, and they do great work for the museum.
You know, everybody's for public education almost, and I think one reason you've been able to maintain your support in the legislature is your growing involvement with public education in the state, and your expansion into your new building has, I think, freed up space in the East Wing, I guess. Would you comment on your involvement with public schools and how that's growing?
Well, it's key to our mission, always has been, and of course now we have a building with more space for educational activities, hands-on activities, but that's only a small part of it. We educate, again, through the internet. It has provided us opportunities to be in every classroom in North Carolina. And so we design programs with the participation of teachers and principals so that we can connect visual education around the visual arts into the classroom itself. And we have really a profound program that's been supported by some of the leading corporations in North Carolina and foundations too.
We have about 30 seconds, Ken.
Well, so you've had a great first year in your new museum. You've got a big show under your belt. What's next? What's the next trick?
Oh, well,
more beer and wine?
There's always more beer and wine at the Art Museum, but always, you know, the public wants great exhibitions, a variety of them. The African artist Ella Natsui is up next, but then next year, about this time, a little before, will be Porsche. And we're going to do an exhibition on the history of Porsche design on its 100th anniversary through the 20th century.
That's exciting. That'll do well. Dr. Wheeler, thank you for being on the program. Nice to see you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ken, good to see you. Come back, please.
Thanks for having me.
Phil, always nice to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for watching our program. We hope your weekend is good. Until next week, I'm Chris William for all of us. Bye.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte, enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, who's responsible for rising healthcare costs. Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health is a not-for-profit group of hospitals and medical clinics caring for surrounding communities. Their nurses, physicians, and staff are nationally recognized for their remarkable devotion to patient care. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.